Angeles. The LAPD initiated it. That van you're looking at there, that white van, is believed to be stolen or came back stolen, apparently by running the license plate or from whatever report they got. And that is when the pursuit began. It began in East Los Angeles and got onto the 60 freeway. It has been going eastbound now for about 20 minutes or so, maybe a little longer. There are 4 people inside this white van. Not known whether they are some combination of victims and suspects or whether they're all suspects. We don't know any of that sort of information yet. The police aren't giving us a whole lot to go on. We can tell you that the LAPD started the chase, but as you can see now, a CHP cruiser and several other CHP vehicles are behind it now. They have taken over this pursuit. That is fairly typical when a pursuit gets on a freeway. Once it's on the freeway and stays on there, the CHP will most likely take it over. If it goes back onto surface streets, then the local police may take it over, or the CHP may continue with it, depending on what sort of person they're chasing, what the crime is that's involved. So what we know is very little. A stolen car, you see it's going eastbound, 68 miles an hour. The speeds are not overly reckless. It has been anywhere between 65 and 75 miles an hour from what I've been able to see using our SkyMap 7 technology that is keeping track of both the speed of the vehicle and its location and direction, and also what what side streets it may be going off onto in the event it does get off the freeway. But for now, on the #1 lane of the 60 freeway in Diamond Bar, heading east, at about 68 miles an hour. Not much faster, really, than the flow of traffic. In fact, I'm guessing that the people you see in those other cars at the top of the screen are people that have pulled over because they see the flashing lights. They pulled over and slowed down because he's passing them at a fairly good clip, and obviously the traffic is not very heavy at this time of night. Sorry about the breakup in our signal. We'll get it back. Probably had to switch transmitters. But I just wanted to let you know, if you're watching this on Facebook, that we have Air 7 HD over it. And because of the technology that we employ in covering pursuits such as this, you will be able to see, along with me, where he's going, how fast, and position, location, and direction. So you'll be able to follow along and get a sense of where this thing is heading. You can see the traffic is light. The danger that poses to other drivers means that it's fairly minimal at this point, given what's happening. At least it is right now. Again, sorry for the breakup in our signal. Our helicopter will probably have to climb a little bit higher. And you know that up above it, you've got a CHP helicopter, or it could be the LAPD helicopter that's still over the vehicle as it's being pursued. And they're keeping that night sun on it, and they will then continue their pursuit of this vehicle. All we know is that it's a stolen car with 4 people inside it, and they are continuing the pursuit. Now, on the phone with me is our JT Alpa, who can tell me a little bit about what we're looking at here. JT?
Well, Mark, as you see, this pursuit continues on. The original want on this vehicle, from my understanding, we're still trying to get this confirmed, was when the vehicle possibly was involved in a traffic violation when the LAPD Metropolitan officers actually ran the plate. Well, the plate came back to a different vehicle than that white Astra van you see, and that's called a cold-plated vehicle. And, well, that's when they tried to light it up, and the pursuit was on through the Los Angeles area, now eastbound on the 60, as you see. But the pursuit continues. Again, very dark windows on this minivan, as you mentioned, Mark. And I'm not sure how many people are on board, but right now it's a failure to yield with the possibility of this vehicle being a stolen vehicle. That's what they have at this moment.
It's interesting that Metro were the ones that initially initiated this pursuit, because correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's the other name for the SWAT team. Right?
Well,
I mean,
LAPD Metropolitan Division has several divisions within several platoons, I should say, within Metropolitan. There are several what's called line platoons. Now, their job in Metropolitan is to go out and do heavy-duty crime suppression throughout the city, in the valley and in the basin. So different platoons will do different missions. Metropolitan consists of the line platoons, like I mentioned. It's SWAT, it's K-9, and it's also the mounted unit. So there are several specialized units. and platoons within Metropolitan Division, and most of them are basic line platoons that go out and do heavy-duty crime suppression throughout the city wherever it's needed.
Okay, and this began in the East Los Angeles area. So again, what you're hearing is that it began with some sort of traffic violation. They ran the plate, and it came back to a vehicle other than this white van, and that, of course, is a problem. That's an indication that somebody's doing something wrong just from the get-go, and it's a violation enough that the person involved should be pulled over and dealt with, and this person, of course, has now refused to yield. So that is what we have, and as we see this, the speeds are not tremendous. These are not triple-digit speeds. These are in the around between 60 and 75 miles an hour is what I've been seeing so far. So as pursuits go, it doesn't have the level of danger that we have certainly seen in other instances. You and I, JT, of course, have covered a lot of these and seen lots of different outcomes and different tactics employed by both the pursuing police and by the suspects even. And this one seems to like going in a straight line and staying on the freeway and not going too fast.
Yeah, and that's always good news for the police department now that the CHP has taken over the pursuit. It's at highway speeds, and it's been averaging from SkyMap 7 anywhere from 60 to 70 miles per hour, which is pretty much your normal highway speed. In fact, it's well below normal speeds if, the way we drive in Los Angeles sometimes. But it's up to the suspect right now. He's really dictating what's happening with his pursuit. There are supervisors in the pursuit for the CHP, and there was earlier with the LAPD kind of managing the pursuit and just kind of matching what the suspect is doing. But right now, the pursuit will continue at these speeds. And right now, we know from seeing these pursuits, Mark, that it can change very quickly and very drastically. But right now, the police departments that are involved in this pursuit like the way it's going. It's going slow, as you mentioned. It's going safe. Not a whole lot of lane changes, no severe activities from the suspect. And right now, it's just they're going to stay with that suspect and follow what he does, and hopefully he'll just pull over and it'll end without anybody getting hurt.
Yeah, I'm watching our coverage as well as watching on Facebook how people are writing in. And a Facebook observer by the name of Deanne Cox just said, do the pit maneuver already. But there's some, there are tactical limitations on when and where and how they can perform a pit maneuver. And it's at freeway speeds like this, it's not advised, is it?
Well, it really depends on the situation. If there are very exigent circumstances, every police department has their own policies on when and where they use all sorts of different pursuit intervention techniques. Usually at highway speeds at this, it's not the best idea to do it. Now that we're in a different situation where the suspects were wanted for murder or fleeing felons going to something, that might change the circumstances for that type of a maneuver to happen. But they're always taking into consideration of the public and even the suspect drivers or the passengers in the vehicle. They're considering their safety before they do something like that. So in this situation, it probably wouldn't warrant a pit maneuver, but usually that would happen on slower speeds, on surface streets, in areas that are conducive for that and may be safe and not putting the general public in jeopardy. And
they probably have to take into account the fact that there are 4 people believed to be in that vehicle, and that would be something they would also keep under consideration, that maybe not all of them are suspects, maybe there's some victims in there, and people who have no choice but to be along for the ride, even though they're not part of whatever criminality this is. So that's a factor too. You don't want this thing flipping. You don't want to all of a sudden be dealing with 4 people taken off. I mean, there's all sorts of ramifications. So what they have to do, I guess, at this point, at 70 miles an hour eastbound on the 60 freeway in the Chino area now, is just continue the pursuit. CHP right behind him, and a helicopter overhead with the night sun that is lighting up the scene. There's really no way this person's going to be able to get away. This is not a high-performance vehicle. It's a minivan, and it's being pursued by vehicles that are, in fact, pretty high performance. Some of them are at the, I don't know if they're modified necessarily, but they certainly are pretty powerful engines in these sort of cruisers. These Ford Explorers, I believe, that they use now with the CHP. And so they can certainly keep up, as well as, of course, the helicopter overhead. So he's not going to really get away. Not much of a chance of that. Although, these things, they can employ different sorts of tactics, as we saw about About a week and a half ago, you were with us. I believe it was a Wednesday night when it was a night where there were like 3 different pursuits in Los Angeles, and one of them, the suspect ended up going under a freeway bridge and switching cars with someone who was helping him out, and almost got away, although some of the pursuing officers on the ground managed to see what was happening and followed him, and eventually that suspect was taken into custody. But what we have here is someone who's basically going in a straight line at 71 miles an hour with his lights on, not weaving in and out of traffic. But he or she, don't know if it's a male or female driver, is in a vehicle that has a plate that doesn't match the vehicle. And that is an immediate clue to a law enforcement officer that this could be someone who was planning to do something nefarious. That might be a tactic that would be employed, for example, by a robbery crew, right? I mean, if they were going to rob some place, they would want to, they'd get a vehicle, they'd put different plates on it and be prepared to dump it if need be, and so this is something that they would employ, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Robbery situations. It was a very violent day in Los Angeles today with several shootings throughout the city, even and a stabbing in the downtown area. So when suspects, gang members have been known to steal vehicles, cold plate them, and then go out and do these types of shootings and crimes. So a very, very good point you make there, Mark, that and especially in a day like today, a very violent day in Los Angeles, this could be something that maybe officers don't even know may be going on there. They just saw a vehicle, saw a traffic violation, ran that plate. The vehicle comes back to a different vehicle, and you really don't know what they've got going on there. And that's what the supervisor in this pursuit, he's got to weigh all these options. How many people are on board? What the suspects may be wanted for, what information they're trying to gather during this pursuit, any intel they can get from anybody, but they don't know who this vehicle belongs to. This could be obviously a stolen vehicle, so they can't run the plate and talk to the victim of the stolen vehicle to find out who it may belong to, if they know these people. So there's a lot of questions in the officer's mind during these pursuits, a lot of unknowns, if you will, and that's what they deal with during these types of things, and they try to manage it the best way they can.
Right, and as we look now, we've got our extreme vision camera zoomed in very tight, and you can just get a shot of the driver in there. It's really hard to kind of tell what anything much about the individual because it's pretty dark, but you can get a close look inside that van, and it's believed that there are 4 people inside it. Is this a Chevy Astra van? I believe that's what this is. Looks to be fairly old, and maybe 71, 72 miles an hour is as fast as that thing can go. And so that's why this pursuit is not, approaching the kind of danger limits or danger zones that you would see in other pursuits.
Very top-heavy, these vehicles as well. And I've driven them years ago. We used to drive around in one. They're very top-heavy, and they don't do corners or handling very well. And you mentioned it before, the new Explorers, the lawn Explorers they've got some pretty beefed-up suspensions in them and braking systems and more horsepower engines, so they're a very good vehicle to keep up with this. But you can see CHP even giving him just a little bit of room, not right on his tail. Just a few minutes ago, you may have noticed that the CHP has a tactic that they do in their pursuits where they constantly are rotating in new officers and rotating out the officers after they've been in the pursuit. Now that they've crossed into the San Bernardino County line, they've crossed over the line through Chino into the Ontario area. Now they're going into different CHP areas, and they will rotate those officers out, something that CHP does that really no other municipality police department does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so and they have that ability. Of course, they've got officers all over the region, different places where they are headquartered, and so yes, they can bring in officers from different divisions, fresh eyes. Fatigue won't be a factor. It's almost like you bring in substitute. You bring in your players that you can substitute
right
on a team, and they're fresh and they're able to continue the endeavor, and so that's what they have here. Again, gas would be a factor for this suspect, but not necessarily for the pursuing agency because they can rotate vehicles. They can bring in vehicles that have a full tank and continue the pursuit and not worry about losing this person just because they run out of gas. But what will most likely happen is that this Chevy Astra van, if nothing else, if they don't give up before they run out of gas, they're going to run out of gas. We've seen that happen enough times too. They just end up stopping in the middle of the road. And hopefully, if and when that happens, we will see this person give up and find out more about what we're looking at here. For now, it's just it is a pursuit at relatively not crazy speeds, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah, I don't even think the suspects really made a lane change out of that number 3 lane. I don't remember him changing lanes. So staying in the same lane, staying in the same speeds. A lot of the times, too, depending on the want on the suspects, even though the CHP has taken over the pursuit, LAPD or any of the municipalities that are in pursuit may keep one unit with the pursuit. But when they start getting really far east and out of the area of the original pursuing entity, excuse me, if they're just wanted for being stolen vehicle suspects, GTA, Grand Theft Auto, they usually just let the CHP handle that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they kind of hand it off because it's not worth deploying a lot of officers out of their jurisdiction for a crime that is not super urgent when there are other things that are happening. As we know, it has been a kind of a violent day in Los Angeles. Another story that we're actually covering tonight, there was a shooting in Venice. Some people fired into a crowd of people in Venice tonight, and that is a story that we're covering. So the LAPD has got their hands full this evening, and now they've got this pursuit that they're dealing with. So yeah, it might be the kind of thing where they back off and decide to let the CHP handle it, and whatever jurisdiction he ends up in. He is now in San Bernardino County, Ontario to be specific, still eastbound on the 60 freeway, and has been since this pursuit pretty much began. It began in the area of 7th and Central in Los Angeles, and just got on the freeway heading eastbound and has continued that way, basically alternating between the number 1, the number 2, the number 3 lanes, not weaving, not doing anything crazy, not getting off the freeway and getting on surface streets and driving erratically. Hasn't done any of that. And the speeds have been, I mean, this is 68 to 71 miles an hour. This is the kind of speed that you wouldn't even get a second look from a CHP officer if you were driving at that speed normally on the freeway. So he's not driving at breakneck speed. Not sure if this would enter the area of felony evading. I've got to kind of get a sense of that, whether speed is a factor, kind of the kind of maneuvers that they're involved would place that in the area of a felony. What we have at this point, I think, is just evading police, right?
Yeah, we didn't see what his actions were when he was on the surface streets, or how many traffic violations may have incurred that. But right now they have an evading. But obviously the larger crime, what they're probably looking at in a more severe crime, and that's why they're staying with the pursuit, is they think that may be a stolen vehicle because of the cold-plated. But a lot of the police departments now, Mark, are really curtailing their pursuit policies and really trying to manage the type of crimes they're chasing. And if it's just a very low-grade traffic violation with someone that runs, they know they can get them another day if they have the plate and they've got the registration and they know where they're at. So they're really trying to manage these departments, the liability involved in these pursuits. And that's why you see a lot of tracking going on, especially when suspects are driving very erratically. They try to back off, give them a little room to see if they'll slow down. And they usually don't. They'll usually re-engage that pursuit. But CHP's policy is when they're on their highways and it's their pursuit, they usually stick it out, and they'll stick with it till the end. If the suspect gets off the freeway, LAPD air support, I believe, is still over the pursuit. We'll have to get that verified, but they've taken it from the city out of the city, and they're going to stay with the pursuit. And they're going to let all those municipalities and those smaller cities that the suspect is heading towards, they're going to advise them when they're going through their city, even when they're on the freeway. And if they get off the freeway in that city, there's a good possibility that those municipalities may join in if the CHP requests them, and even take it over if it stays in that city. So a lot of logistics go on to these things, a lot of communication, a lot of liability management by the supervisors in a pursuit, especially these long ones.
Right, and I would guess it behooves them to, if it does get off onto a street and a surface street in an area that the CHP officers might not be familiar with, that they get in touch with someone who is familiar with those streets. That would be the local police agency, so that they know where this person could be going. They can block off streets ahead of a pursuit, and they can, if there are choke points where they might be able to do a spike strip, they'll know about those. So I guess it is always better to have the local officers involved, if possible, if and when it were to get onto surface streets for any length of time in a jurisdiction that is different from the jurisdiction in which this began.
And also, when those suspects get into those cities and they have a tendency to even get to run from the vehicles when the pursuit stops. It also it gets the CHP to get more of those units in the city to set up what they call a containment or a perimeter. As you see some of those other CHP units now coming in to relieve CHP officers in the pursuit, you're seeing that change of watch, if you will, that rotation of officers that's happening right now that we talked about earlier. But it's always good to let those municipalities or those other agencies know when it's coming through, because if it does get off and they get what they call a foot bail and they run from the vehicle, they can get that perimeter set up pretty quickly with more officers and more resources to get him contained within that perimeter.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, still eastbound on the 60 freeway, now in Glen Avon. He's passed through through L.A. County into San Bernardino County, now in Riverside County, and still continuing eastbound on the 60 freeway. Nothing's been thrown out of the vehicle that have noticed. There's been no erratic activity, and so this vehicle, which this white minivan, which is believed to have 4 people inside it, is just continuing eastbound on the 60 freeway with the CHP in pursuit. Don't know if LAPD is still involved. Don't know if any of the local jurisdictions might have joined in while it's on the freeway here. And the source of that night sun now is in some question, whether that's still an LAPD helicopter over it or whether LAPD has decided, as you mentioned, J.T. Alpaugh, to hand it off to another agency, and maybe that's a CHP helicopter that is overhead, or perhaps a Riverside County Sheriff's helicopter. So we just don't know some of these elements of it, but the pursuit does continue. A story we had earlier today involved an Orange County police agency. I forget which one. I'll have to look it up, but they were testing today, and they demonstrated for the news media a device that they would have used or would be able to use to basically kind of put an end to the need for these sorts of pursuits. That if it's somebody, I would think this would be a prime candidate for that, this sort of a pursuit where it's not necessarily a murder suspect they're dealing with, but at most, at least what they know at this point is a possible stolen car. They would shoot this sort of a projectile that has a tracking device on it. It was Tustin Police. Thank you. Mark Drew, our director, told me in my ear. Police in Tustin were testing this. They showed it to us earlier on ABC7. And it is a projectile that shoots out from the grill of a police car and sticks to the vehicle. It's got a GPS tracking device in it. The officers then back off. The pursuit suspect may or may not know that they're being tracked with this device. But they continue along their merry way. They think maybe they've gotten away or the police have given up. They go to wherever they go. They stop and suddenly find themselves surrounded because, of course, the officers have been able to track it and know based on where on a map can tell exactly where he is and will surround him or her with alacrity. And so that was something that we saw demonstrated today, and I would think this is the sort of pursuit that it might be perfect for. These sorts of low speed, perhaps not necessarily high value. High value may be the wrong word, but high priority crime that is tying up resources at this point. It might be better served by putting some sort of a tracking device on there if it becomes available.
Yeah, those technologies, Mark, that you're speaking of have been in development, and lots of departments all over the country have been testing and developing these type of, again, pursuit intervention tactics and technologies to really try to limit the liabilities of these pursuits. One of the ones you mentioned, that's been in development for quite some time, and it looks like it's getting to that technology readiness level where they're actually getting ready to test and deploy it in the field. And like you said, this would be the perfect opportunity. There's also some technologies out there that they're trying, a high-powered radio frequency jamming devices that actually can jam the car's computer up and make it actually stop. So all these technology almost reminds you of James Bond and Q getting all these technologies out
right.
to try to stop these types of things, and it's really coming along here. And in the next few years, we may see that type of thing where they put that tag on those vehicles and they just completely back out, and the air unit just watches from the air, and they grab a curb and park. They think they're in the clean, and like you said, 5 or 6 police cars come out of the woodwork and take into custody out of nowhere. So all things these police departments are looking at to try to limit the liability, try to create a safer environment here for the public at large that can actually slow these guys down and not cause anybody to get hurt.
Right, and that's the ultimate goal here. Get the suspect in custody, and everybody, nobody gets hurt. All the officers get to go home. The suspect goes to jail wherever he or she is destined, and that nobody ends up in the hospital or worse at the end of this, and that no innocent people along the way get involved in any sort of traffic accident. So there are a lot of things to consider here, and the things that the police are trying to do to minimize the sort of accidents that we have all seen in covering these pursuits over the years. The kinds of things that really, that are of great concern to everyone involved, to the people watching, to us. We watch these pursuits and we see accidents or near accidents. We've seen, people nearly hit by cars. I remember a few months ago, somebody ended up on a sidewalk and missed a stroller. A woman pushing a stroller had to run out of the way and got missed by inches by this vehicle that slammed onto the sidewalk during a pursuit. And, these are the kind of things that if there's a way to mitigate that, to eliminate that, agencies would be right to certainly find it, to look at it and determine it. And, things like, electronically in some way switching off a car's engine if possible, remotely. Or, excuse me, that tracking device that we've been talking about, the Tustin police were testing today. Just different sorts of tactics that would be involved here that would mitigate that sort of potential huge problem. What we're looking at here, just for those of you just joining us on Facebook, is a pursuit of a vehicle. This began in Los Angeles in the area of 7th Street and Central Avenue. LAPD Metro officers who may have been on a crime suppression sort of a patrol effort in that community spotted this vehicle. There was some sort of apparently a traffic violation. They ran the plate. The plate came back to a different car. It didn't come back to this, it doesn't belong to this white minivan. It belongs to a different car. That is a huge red flag. Usually, as J.T. Alpaugh was mentioning, it's the kind of thing it's the kind of tactic that felons might employ if they were about to commit a crime. They want a car that isn't identifiable as their own, and they switch the plates. So that immediately initiated a pursuit, which began in that area of Los Angeles and continued mostly for pretty much the entirety of it onto the 60 freeway and eastbound. So we don't know. Usually these pursuits, they go to a familiar area. They try to go to a familiar area where they might bail out and try to run from police. We don't know if this, if Rubidoux or now Riverside is familiar to these individuals or not, but they have certainly made no effort to go to any place along the way. They have been going eastbound on the 60 freeway consistently at a pretty moderate speed, between 60 and 72, 73 miles an hour in this minivan. They're slowing down now, and it appears they're pulling to the right, and they're getting off. So this is a new development here. The pursuit now, this is Russell Street. Well, let's see. Where are we getting off here? Exit 53A in Riverside. Pretty soon we'll see what street this is.
This might be a freeway.
Oh, it's a freeway. It looks like he's getting on the 91 westbound. So now, what a big loop. Now he's going westbound, potentially. All right. I've got to get a sense of where we are here. This SkyMap 7 technology is great. I'm still learning how to use it. So I'm looking down at the bottom of the screen, and I see it's on, yeah, it's on the 91,
there,
right?
Mark, is the actual indicator where the center of your screen is telling you what highway he's on, what the nearest exit he's on, and the direction of the area that's going. And that second line is basically the city that they're in and the county they're in. So it's wherever the crosshairs, and of course the speed, as he's moving in a more southeasterly direction here as they transition from highway to the next highway. It takes a few seconds for it to catch up.
Oh, look.
But it looks like he's continuing.
He's got a, if we look closely here, I know you've got a bit of a delay, but if you look at the right front tire, it appears the right front tire is flat and is actually shredding. So he is slowing down a lot now. He's on the 91 freeway in downtown Riverside, and he's coming to a stop, and looks like his left hand is out the driver's side window. Keep in mind,
this is at Mission Inn Avenue,
right?
Is the off-ramp. This
is basically downtown Riverside, right? Mission Inn. I was there not too long ago, and so now what's going to complicate this is that the reports are that there are 4 people inside. They don't know if they have 4 suspects or it, you know, 3 victims and a suspect or some combination thereof. Don't know the disposition of these folks, don't know the ages. They're going to have to get everybody out safely and take them all into custody and then sort out who's who and what's what. But it does appear that this thing is coming to an end. Oh, it looks all right. Did that door just open or close there? Did I miss something? That little door on the side?
The driver's hands are out the driver's side.
Right. But I mean the door on the sound wall there, I don't know if it was a trick of the light or whether, you know, whether I saw that door open or close or not. But anyway.
It's possible. So what will happen sometimes in these situations is passengers will try to get out, and they'll tell them over the PA system on the vehicle, stay in the car until you're commanded to leave one at a time. CHP wants to call them out one at a time so they can control the situation. They don't want everyone coming out at the same time. So you can see the driver starting to make his exit out of the driver's side, giving him the commands. This is what's called a high-risk felony stop, making sure those hands are up. They're going to call him out to the middle. They'll probably do a couple 360s, maybe even show his waistband. He'll step away from the vehicle, and we've seen this time and time again. And they'll call them out one by one until they're all taken into custody in a methodic and very slow way.
All right. Well, 1 down, 3 to go, it would appear. At least the reports are that we have. So this is the driver. They're commanding him to lift up his shirt so that they can tell that there are no weapons tucked into his waistband. That is something that is a pretty standard procedure when they're doing a felony stop. And as we're watching this unfold, very familiar at this point, they're going to command him to walk backwards, to not look at them, to keep his hands on his head. And at some point they're going to have him kneel and then lay flat on the ground with his arms spread out. And that is
sometimes every agency does things just a little bit different. CHP sometimes will have the tendency to keep calling them back on their feet, come to the sound of my voice, where LAPD will actually lay them out and prone them out, if you will. Bury their head, put their face out to the side, bury your heels, spread your legs, and they'll take a team and they'll actually go in and arrest them while they're laying down on the pavement. CHP sometimes uses, it depends on the agency, it depends on the officer's preference, but it sounds like they're calling them back to the sound of my voice, and they'll take them right to the front of that cruiser and they'll take them into custody there. Especially that tactic's used quite a bit when there are multiple suspects in a car.
Right. Okay, so this is one of what are reported to be 4 people in that white minivan. So 1 person is now out, and it's the driver. And he is, as you described, JT, they're bringing him right back into the area where the officers are, getting them behind the lead vehicles there, walking him backwards quite a ways. And they have already kind of done a cursory look at him, thanks to him lifting up his shirt and complying, to determine that he doesn't have any weapons in his waistband. But they are not done yet. They're, of course, going to have to pat him down. It looks like they're going to have him, okay, they got him on his knees there, it looks like. He's kneeling behind that first vehicle, hands behind his head. He is complying in every way, and they are taking him into custody. So that is one of what are believed to be as many as 4 people inside this white van that were inside this white van.
I find it interesting that you mentioned, Mark, that you saw it on the shot that you had of that right front tire that shredded, and I did not see an opportunity or even a place where the CHP could lay down a spike strip or a stop stick. I'm not sure if that happened earlier. Maybe we just missed it, but very unusual. Maybe just the tire gave out on this vehicle, and that was very fortunate for law enforcement if that was the case.
Right. Well, it's yeah, he might have just had a flat tire just kind of naturally. And that was, yeah, right. It's certainly a good fortune if they were able, if that in fact happened, because it seems to have brought this pursuit to an end. Again, this is the westbound 91 at Mission Inn Avenue in Riverside. This began a pretty long ways away in the East LA area, and it went for quite a ways at moderate speeds, between 60 and 71, 72 miles an hour. And now what you're seeing is CHP officers approaching this van where they had been reporting, or the reports were that there were as many as 4 people inside.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's still the case, because their body posture would be quite a bit different if there were still people in that van. They look more relaxed right now as they have flashed their flashlights inside, and so it looks like that was it. It was just the driver, one person inside the van, that white minivan, and that driver is now in custody.
And Mark, we're getting information from the operator in Air 7HG, Rob Gluckman, who actually saw them spike strip the van, and that happened at Maine, 60, I believe it was 60 at Maine.
Okay.
He did actually see that, so they did a very good job of concealing that spike strip, but apparently he was spike stripped right at Maine, and that caused that tire to go out.
Yeah, well, they were very good at it because I sure missed it. And apparently the driver missed it because he hit that spike strip and lost his tire. Now you're looking at the backup here. This is the westbound 91 Riverside Freeway. Look at the traffic backup. It backed up pretty quickly there. And so that's going to clear once they can get that vehicle. Luckily, the vehicle's already off to the side of the road, so that will be helpful. They've got the suspect in custody. And so they'll probably clear this freeway up and pretty soon while they continue to investigate and see why this guy ran from the police in the first place with that vehicle with the cold plate. And you can see, looks like one of the officers has got custody of the vehicle and is driving it out of the way. They're going to take it off the freeway, take the suspect off the freeway, take him into custody. And we've got a live cut-in coming up on ABC 7. Stand by.